Hello, everybody, and welcome to the, oh, that's the wrong agenda date. Sorry, it's it's reading January 5th over here. It's February 2nd, 2023, meeting of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee meeting. I'm going to go through a roll call vote of members here today. Chris?
Here.
Emily?
Here.
Scott?
Here.
Myself? Here. Margie?
Here.
David?
Here.
Andy?
Here.
Brian?
Here.
And Dewana?
Here.
Welcome. And welcome, we also have joining us Councilwoman Mosley and city staff. First, sorry, I'm all confused with the wrong agenda here. First we'll approve the minutes from last meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review the action minutes from last meeting?
So moved.
Motion, second on that?
Second.
Okay. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Thanks.
Do you need a copy?
Sorry. Oh, I think I have the right one. The date's just wrong. Is that what it is? That's what's throwing me off.
Oh.
Okay, I'm so thrown off. Okay, so we approved minutes. So the first thing we're going to discuss is discussion of our bylaws and election of officers. What we've been working through is to determine kind of next chair and vice chair role. We've had some discussions for who may or may not be interested in that, and then some. We've explored some options for being able to change our bylaws that would allow co-chairs if that's what people want. So I'll kind of leave it. I think Brian's taking a little bit of lead in kind of corralling some of this. I'll kind of get.
I mean, there are a number of people who've expressed interest in leadership, but no one who wants to take on the chairman role. And so I think that's what sort of led us to, should we consider doing co-chairs or not? I think co-chairs are a viable option from a city's perspective. I think it would just mean there'd be more work to spell out the roles between the co-chairs in terms of who would be, organizing individual meetings and agendas and the kind of thing that the chairman's responsibilities would include. So it's just really a question of how that would occur. And I don't know if we want to have those discussions offline first to figure out between the people who are interested how they want to do that, or just go ahead and approve co-chairs and the bylaws and then.
I think you could all give us the indication that you want, or maybe with a vote if you want, that you want the bylaws to come back to you amended to vote on have co-chairs, or have it as an option, or if you could, as much detail you can give us is great. And then you actually have to have the Princeton bylaws to vote on it. We can't just.
Got it.
You know what I mean?
So one option is we could decide, so we could even draft it, can we draft it flexible? Can we say, hey, we want to adjust the bylaws that would allow the option of having two co-chairs instead of having a traditional chair and vice chair?
That's what I was thinking, so you don't have to keep changing them over and over
Okay.
again.
So maybe that would be the move we can take today, is to take a vote on that, ask for that to be drafted up, then between now and the next meeting, knowing that that's an option, we could vote on that. We could vote on that bylaw change, and in the meantime, people can start to know that that's the path, and you can work offline for figuring that out. Sense? Okay. So,
one other point to that, I think one of the thoughts around co-chairs was that since a number of us are either directly funded by the City of Asheville or working on city-funded projects, that part of the idea of having co-chairs would be to make sure that the leadership was intact as we if a chair had to recuse themselves. So I'd love to get some guidance around what that would need to look like, maybe what that looks like in other committees that have a similar kind of situation. So that to me, that feels like the thing that's really driving, as much as workload is driving the idea of having co-chairs, the other is sort of how do we make sure that we are steering clear of any appearance of conflict of interest, or managing to keep leadership intact when if somebody had to recuse themselves from a vote.
I think so is that something, so does that preclude us moving forward, do you think, with kind of asking for this? Because we're not asking to have to change it, we're just saying, let's add that in, that we have the option of that in our bylaws. So we're not saying we are changing our bylaws, but at least we have the option for.
Right, I'm suggesting if some more information around conflict of interest and those sorts of things could come to our March meeting I'm fine with going ahead and creating the flexibility within the bylaws to allow co-chairs, but I'd love some guidance as we're thinking about how we actually fill those roles around, when a committee member would need to recuse themselves, how that all, sort of works around for folks who,
Sure.
are funded by the city.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've.
Yeah,
I've done
we've done that with other boards where we'd have Janice come maybe just for a short time, and she could talk to you about what conflict of interest is, and you can ask questions. Because it can be direct conflict of interest, or it can be perception of conflict. Perception is a little more squishy, and sometimes it's just cleaner to recuse yourself if you think it could be perceived that way.
Yeah, I'm not going to, over the years, a few times people have said, hey, I better step out of this discussion because this, but yeah, I guess I haven't seen too much of it, but yet, so it's good to get freshed up on that policy, just so we know, since there might be, depending on now and future committee members, there might be more people that are taking city funding.
And that also, we should definitely have some type of discussion on, if it were to be co-chairs, how you might divide it, what that looks like, communication with HCD, those kinds of things too.
Yeah, and I think in some ways we haven't since we've been operating these two task forces with the build and the connect, there has been a little bit more of a separation of okay, this group and these interests are focusing on this, and this group and these interests are focusing on this, and then they come together. So I think there has been a little bit of a figuring out how to, leadership roles that have risen, and kind of whether they've been formal or not. I think we've at least set a little bit of a precedence with that. Okay, so I guess what we need to have, so we should have a motion that asks the amendment to be drafted that would allow that would allow the option of AHAC having co-chairs, or
I don't know if it's, David, do you have a thought on that? I don't know if it's necessary.
Yeah, I think we could probably just move to have the bylaws amended and presented to us to approve at the next
That's
meeting.
fine.
okay.
To allow for co-chairs. I'll make that motion.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, so the roll call vote on that, just since it's a formal motion. Duana?
Aye.
Brian?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
David?
Aye.
Margie?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Emily?
Aye.
Scott?
Aye.
Myself, aye. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Just so you all, and I guess we should also, in this discussion for next time, maybe, so my term, I think, is up in September. So I think it would also be good to kind of freshen up that list. That way we also know whose seats are current, who's up in September, so we also make some decisions based on that, and then kind of update the, I think we should look at kind of the committee it'd be a good time to look at the committee makeup, know between now and September who's on and who's rolling off, and then what seats that we're supposed to be representing that may or may not be represented best, so we know what we might need to focus on for new seats. Any other discussion anyone wants to have about?
So we will have on the agenda next time a presentation of the conflict of interest policy 2, or are we wanting to wait on that?
Sure.
Okay.
I'll get someone, hook or by crook.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else have anything they want to add or talk about for that? Cool. All right, new business. We've got the review of the leach and policy revision process, and talk about our calendaring. And then I do want to bring one thing up, just because Councilwoman Mosey is here and has to leave at some point. One thing that's we've discussed as a committee. It was kind of in the news this week a bit about the idea of non-discrimination for income for housing, and then there was a pretty big news story this week about Hawthorne Apartments making. It sounded like it was a policy company decision, but then it said it might be individual development decisions about not accepting indirect payments from tenants for housing subsidies. So that means besides city funding, there's so many different layers. Evelyn Charities, there's so many different layers of housing subsidies and rent subsidies that exist for people in need, especially to help keep them in housing when they're going through vulnerable situations. So it kind of brought, I think it kind of brought up to the attention and put a spotlight on that this is a big issue, and it's not just city funding, and that we've had this discussion. So I just wanted to kind of get an update. I know I hear it's moving through legal a little bit. So if you wouldn't mind, Councilwoman Mosley, just kind of sharing, because it's something you've asked for us to, you're driving, you've asked for some help on, just to let us know where it is and how we can help.
Good morning, Chairman Bialik. So for a few months now, HCD has been paying close attention to activities in Charlotte. You'll recall that municipality passed a non-discrimination or source of income discrimination ordinance, I don't know, about 6 months ago. And in fact, council, when we did our legislative requests, also included that in those requests. Legal has been looking into it, and at some point is going to come before HCD for further discussion. I will say that a couple of times in our council meetings, I've noticed a bit of concern about it. And one thing that I always bring up is how even with a source of income non-discrimination requirement, it may not be as helpful to folks who are below a certain income level and have the vouchers. Because whatever amount the voucher is worth, if the rent is far in excess of that amount, those vouchers will be essentially of no good. What I will say also, though, that concerned me about the developer that you spoke of is what's going to happen to people who don't even have vouchers. And I would love to hear from you all how you believe developers would respond if we made some type of requirement for properties we incentivize. Would that depress interest from builders? I don't know. That's something that I would want to defer to your expertise on. So if you could have a broader discussion and maybe even talk to folks that you know who are actually building, because my fear as it relates to the current incident is, in actuality, we may be increasing the houseless population if we force folks who, maybe they only need help for 2 months, but when you're on the street, you're on the street, whether you only needed help for 2 months or a year. So that's really my concern. And, I feel like the timing is perfect given that we've just had the update from the National Alliance to End Homelessness. So I'll turn it back over to you, Chair, and you tell me. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I think that's, and that might be something we do. Trying to think how we as a committee step in. This is something that it is valuable input to get from developers, what they think about this, because it's a good point. You don't want to. we don't want to do something or work on creating a policy that then is going to discourage people from doing like making it harder to do the right thing. So I wonder if, it's been on our agenda before we've discussed this. I think what I would be like, one thing I will personally do is just reach out. I know some of these developers. I know different. I could probably pull them in and have a conversation offline and find out. I just wanted to see what others thought or how they can, what you think our involvement should be. And I think this is also a really good example of what AHAC is, because this is a discussion that it's about a policy change, but to really make true policy decision changes, we have to reach into where our depth of experience is and use our offline contacts to then bring them back to the table to have educated discussions on. So I think it is, it's a good example of kind of what our committee is and like how sometimes we do have to reach beyond the scope of actually what's written on the paper of what we're supposed to do to use our experiences. So just curious how we as a committee think we could, what we should be, how much should be done in committee, how much of this is more formal of us asking people we know.
That we know, yeah.
I don't want to take too much conversation on this because we have Luigi's presentation, but if anyone has any thoughts on this.
I was going to ask Councilwoman Mosley, has anybody from City Council talked about going to or addressing Hawthorne or talking to Hawthorne to find out what their rationale is for doing this and why it might be some of their complexes and not others?
To my knowledge, no. Sasha, have you heard anything along those lines? Now, having said that, I haven't had communications with the other HCD members on purpose, right? Because if I talk to one person, then it's a quorum. But it's something that I can bring to the attention of the city manager, and maybe they can move forward from there.
My only comment would be that I do think that legal update is really important to understand what we can and can't do legally in terms of policy.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think there may be some real limitations. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either.
I mean, the Charlotte ordinance is really about projects that have city funding.
Yeah.
It's not every single development.
Yeah, it's only those incentivized
Right.
from this.
Which is
their
still
city.
a lot. It's still really meaningful. It's not. And we did amend our housing trust fund policy to include a non-discrimination piece in there when we just did that last fall.
Yeah.
It might be worth going back for everyone who's been approved already and developed projects to poll those developers already to see would this have changed their mind about their complex and the project and how they developed it.
Because I also, though, it seems to me, at least in the 2+ years that I've been on council, that just about everybody we incentivize ends up saying they'll accept vouchers anyway. The real distinction we were trying to make was having them set aside units for those vouchers. So I don't recall anyone saying we will not accept vouchers.
Yeah, and even this one's not really a city voucher issue. This is more of other subsidy levels, which really the city doesn't have any control over. But
Like an example would be if someone needed rental assistance as a result of COVID, and if they were getting the money through the county, and then the landlord says, no, I'm not going to take that. I think that's the
For sure. Yeah.
issue that's,
I do think there are some landlords or property owners that may see and this is where that engagement is really important, like see, like, oh, if I'm doing this percentage and accepting vouchers, I'm good with that. But if you ask for more, I don't know where's if they have a line. I suspect for some, there is a line there.
and then I wonder how burdensome, in addition to the larger developers, I wonder how potentially burdensome that might be on mom and pops. So, and I don't have the expertise in that to gauge.
I'm more concerned, like, I have to, because I know the experience of people with vouchers and them not being able to secure housing a lot. Like, housing is having a real problem with that, with developments that are already built. just getting them to accept it. So I'm like, in my mind, trying to figure out like, what is the whole, like, what is restricting developers or developers from being more intentional about accepting that, to say we'll accept, but they only accept for a 1-bedroom studio, which we have seen a lot of as a part of ag. It has been like when there's a lot of families that need access, you know what I mean, that, and we incentivize them for smaller units. They give smaller units to vouchers, but even in that process is discriminatory. You know what I mean? So it's like, at what stage of discrimination do we really want to have a foothold or have policy? You know what I mean? So is it the unit size? Is it, you know what I mean? Families, in single, like one person, or like what does that really look like? And so I'm just processing information.
And I did notice in your past minutes, when I was for your annual report, at some point you all had somebody from the Housing Authority come talk to you about vouchers, and I was thinking maybe it's time to do that again. I've had a couple conversations with them about who's having the hardest time finding units, and it's 1 and 3 bedrooms.
Yeah.
And pets are a big barrier, and you know, it's very nuanced and very complicated. It's not like a simple, straightforward thing. But if you want, I could reach out to somebody from the Housing Authority to come speak to you all.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have? You know, it could also be, you know, I think, yeah, we'll reach out. The other, remember we've had some talk about like a developer forum. You know, like that's been discussed, because that way we, you know, it's something that to get the people all in one room to have the discussion about what are the barriers, what are the issues, that, you know, that this would be a good agenda item to bring up on something like that. So this might be, you know, I remember the last time, you know, something we've talked about, and it's all, I don't remember the last time, but maybe we can work on getting that back together, the idea of this developer forum. That way we can get everybody at the table to have, and we can start tracking all of those conversations we want to have, from this discrimination of income to, you know, the unit mix is definitely, that's a big issue. That's something, is, you know, it was part of the policy adjustment we did in December, I think it was December or January, about that not to just have one class of units, because we've seen that a bit. So, but I think, yeah, this kind of revigorating this idea of the developer forum would be a really good idea with all those happening.
We could talk about it when we get to the work plan, and
Yeah,
how that might
yeah.
fit in with
Okay.
other stuff.
Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of people who'd love to be at that table. All right, I guess we'll roll back into the review of the Luigi and policy revision process. If you'd like to share that with us, thanks.
So I thought maybe it might be helpful to do kind of an overall, and I guess I'm going to ask you, like, how many of you feel like you understand the Luigi policy? Or would you like me to kind of go over it?
I'd like a review.
Okay. I'll try not to, if I'm going too slow and you just, somebody, I guess, yeah, not everybody may be on the same page with that. So I'll just go, but I'll try not to take too long. So just really quickly, the Luigi program was set up in 2011 to incentivize the inclusion of affordable housing and development. So it's really for folks, or I believe it was kind of conceptualized as let's get the developers who wouldn't normally include affordable housing, let's get them to include some. So how can we incentivize that? So we basically are using future projected tax revenue to fund affordable units at or below 80%. So the baseline is 20% of your units must be affordable at 80% AMI for a period of 20 years. You have to do that or at least according to our scoring matrix. You could negotiate something different with council. That's the baseline, and that gets you 20 points. We have a whole scoring matrix I'll explain, but then we ask for other things as well. So it's evolved over time. The point structure has evolved over time. The last revision was in June of 21. And it added converting existing market rate units to affordable as an option. And, you know, we've talked about on this committee and with HCD about revising this policy this year. Sooner, everybody wants to do it sooner than later, so. So how it's kind of modeled on our economic development incentive policy. Every 5 points in the matrix is worth 1 year of taxes granted back to the developer. We do not use the words rebate. Rebates are not legal in North Carolina. So we look at what we think the future tax value is. We subtract out the current tax value, which is often very low. So if it's vacant land, it might be $1,000 or a couple $1,000s. And then we get that tax increment. Council approves a maximum award based on that tax value. Currently, the policy says the maximum benefit is 21 years. We've recently, the policy doesn't address this thing, like if you qualify for 21 years, then really you should be doing 21 years of affordability. Those shouldn't, you shouldn't get paid for a year that you're not providing affordable housing. So that's one change we want to make super clear in the policy. Minimum requirements must be at least 2 units. Again, the 20% for 20 years. It has to be in the city limits. Believe it or not, we get that question. It's only for city taxes. I've had some developers assume that we're going to grant them the county taxes back, and we don't have that. We're not getting that money. So it has to be at least 70% square footage of residential. Doesn't count a parking garage. And ideally it's should be located to provide convenient access to jobs, schools, and services. So this is a picture of part of the scoring matrix. So when we get an application, a developer has usually circled these, here's what I think I qualify for. So the first part is the affordability. What percentage of your units are affordable? You get more points if you're going deeper in affordability. You get more points if you do 30 years or 50 years. If you're converting, it's a little bit different, and we haven't seen any of those yet, have not come in. And then there's this rental assistance, if you're providing, it's kind of like accepting vouchers, all different kinds of vouchers. You can get points for that. And then there's some location pieces here. So if you're in the CBD, you automatically get 30 points. So that's 6 years right there. So, and I think that's because land in the CBD is much more expensive, it's harder, et cetera, et cetera. So there is an advantage there. Brownfield redevelopment, some energy efficiency, some sustainability pieces in here, universal design, building in a non-qualified census tract. So the idea here is we want you to build where we don't want to concentrate affordable housing all in certain census tracts. Let's spread it all over our city. And then there's some rehab points. And the transportation, I didn't cover that, but transportation amenity would be you're really close to a grocery store, you're really close to schools. I feel like if you qualify for that through schools, then you should, and the policy doesn't say this, but you should be providing, units that are more than 1 bedroom, right? It doesn't make sense to have 1 bedrooms and you're next to a school and you're going to count that. That doesn't, it doesn't make sense. So the approval process, staff reviews the application. We review it with the applicant, prepares a report, we take it to HCD, and then we take it to finance, and then we take it to city council. And if it's approved, we have a deed restriction, and there's also a grant agreement that we also do with them. And those can be transferred to a new owner, like if a development decides to sell, that that agreement goes it's with the land. It's almost like a conditional zoning. So we start, legal starts drafting these agreements. We execute them before the project is built. So this is where the interesting part is. So let's say you have a project and you estimated it's going to be worth $26 million. That's how Buncombe County is going to assess it. It used to be that county assessors were willing to make these estimates, and they don't want to make those anymore. So it's a little bit murky. And so council approves a value, and that's the maximum. So let's say if council, we do the calculation, let's say you're getting a grant of $100,000 for 20 years. That's $2 million, total grant value, right? Your project is going to, the value is going to go up over time. your taxes will go up over time. But we are not scaling that. We're not saying, yeah, we'll pay your taxes no matter how high they go. We're not doing that. Council's only agreeing to that grant. We don't have the authority to go over and above what council has approved, right? So if somebody was in kind of exigent circumstances and said, look, this has been, they could come back and request a different agreement. We haven't seen that happen. I think only in the last year or two have we seen this uptick in this. And I think it's because how the points are now calculated. Before, the agreements were maybe 4 years or 7 years. Now they're, 16, 17, 18, 20, 21 year long agreements, or a benefit period. Does that make sense? So the total value's going up, and the total value of our tax base that we're committing to these is going up. And that's money we won't have to do other things with. But it's important. Affordable housing is important. I'm not saying it's not. So, this is budgeted every year. It's in our budget as kind of coming out of our taxes. So we work very closely with finance on an ongoing basis to make sure that we'll have adequate resources. So I have a quick case study. I know some of you have seen this. Do you want me to keep going through this? Yes. Okay. So this on 221 Long Shoals was 186 apartments. It was all affordable, rentable square footage, 100%. They committed 20% of their units, which was 37 rental apartments, to be affordable at 80% or below. And they had a mix of 1-bedrooms and studios. And
I'm going to put a quick asterisk in. I believe, just for your example, I think that change was something that ran through, that was from a discussion in our committee. Like, just an example of like when it was originally presented, it was studios. When that application came through and we discussed, we said, hey, and they decided to adjust that on their own. But, just an example of kind of like that discussion and how we weren't actually because we don't formally review Luigi applications, but because we were allowed to discuss it, we brought up a point that the developer did adjust an application on. So I just wanted
right, yeah. I mean, definitely the comments that are made here, we make sure the developer's aware. If council expresses concerns to us, we make sure they're aware of that. So this project is from back in July. We've seen several projects on Long Shoals, and there's actually a brand new project not far from here, just a little bit to the east, a big one that's going to be coming through the process at some point. I don't know if they're going to apply for a Luigi or not. So this was the points they qualified for. 20 points for affordability. Again, that's just that baseline you have to do to get in the program. 10 points for rental assistance. 5 points for housing one person on the homeless by name list. So that's something that we coordinate with Homeward Bound, and maybe there's another agency as well. But I've worked with Emily Ball a little bit on this, and we make sure that it's a good fit for that person and for the landlord. We want to make sure that it's going to be successful. 10 points for location. It's very close to the Ingalls and the schools. 20 points for energy efficiency and solar panels. There's no minimum system size for solar panels right now. That needs to, for me, I think that needs to be quantified a little bit. Like, what are we looking for when we see that? 10 points for universal design and 10 points for a non-qualified census tract. So they qualified for 17 years. And this is just kind of the numbers, so.
Can you back up to one slide?
Sure.
So there's a lot of these things on here that go beyond just affordable housing.
Sure, absolutely.
From a policy perspective, I mean, energy efficiency ranks up there with affordability. Was when the policy was developed, was that the whole goal, was to cover a myriad of objectives, or did that just sort of creep in over the course of time?
I don't think it creeped in. I think, and I wasn't here around this policy. I actually used to be on SACE, the Sustainability Committee, when I wasn't on staff. And I think there has been a goal of like, let's interweave, just like with everything, equity, sustainability, affordable housing, we want to weave all these things through everything. So that it is a goal. It doesn't always work, obviously, for a housing developer. So I think it's intentional, I guess is what I'm saying.
But that is the one that you think needs to be a little better designed.
There just needs to be, I think sometimes we just need to quantify a little bit more. I think the energy efficiency were good, the green building were pretty good. It's just the solar panels, I would like to get some numbers behind that. Because staff needs to be able to say, yes, this meets or no.
Yeah, does it have a solar panel?
Is it, you're right, exactly. Like, that's not cool.
I would say same with the universal design
Mhm.
bullet point.
Yeah, there's
That's
some-
fairly-
Yeah, so there's some technical stuff in here that I
Okay.
think is, it's kind of like housing trust, some stuff is really just technical. And then there's the big ideas, like, do we agree with this idea? Do we agree with where this
Because
gets
the
us?
universal design typically costs more
Right.
Yeah,
to build.
Is it ambiguous?
it's fairly, ambiguous. I mean.
What qualify,
what it
quanti, or,
actually
yeah,
means.
qualifies.
Yeah, and guidelines to achieve that.
Thank you for pointing that out. So these are just the numbers. So this property was paying $13,579 every year on vacant, I think it was mostly vacant land. There might have been a house or two, I don't remember. They estimated 26 million, which would be 104. So we subtract the 13, we get to 91,300 a year estimate for 17 years, which is 1.5 million. Now, if they build the project and it gets assessed by the tax office and it's only worth 20 million and their tax bill is less, they don't get to like cash in extra money, right? It's based on your tax bill. So how it works is they pay their taxes, then they give us the receipt, we make sure they're meeting their requirements, and then we can grant it back.
Just one question, not specific to this project, because they did make that transition, as Barry just noted. But if we say a project is approved for Luigi, but then the affordability, like the amount of units of affordability changes, for whatever reason, like we've heard things like, oh, development costs, we can't afford to have that many units, and so that shifts, how does it impact this commitment to them if
Sure.
their outcomes to us shifts?
Sure. So there's a couple things. So there's projects that have to get approved from zoning, just zoning. Projects that have to get approved by council and projects that don't. So for projects that get approved, like this is a CZ, conditional zoning. So we have like kind of a double check on this. So we have this agreement, and in their CZ, it will be in their conditions. I'm doing this number or a percentage. Now, you can always do more, like if you know what I mean? Like if they did more affordability, that's not a problem, right? Because they're still meeting their agreement. If they wanted to do less, they would need to come back to council. So I guess the question is, are they reducing the percentage of affordability, or their total unit count dropped and they're still doing 20%? Do you know what I mean? Those are two different scenarios.
How do you track it? So I've got, 38 units are supposed to be affordable, and I've rented out 7 at market rate. How do you know they did that?
It's through our monitoring program. Like, so every year we're monitoring. People have to submit rent rolls every year.
Good, yeah, that's a question, because that's a question we always seem to ask, how do we know, And we do know, right? That's why I just wanted, because I know we always ask it, because we always question it, but they are monitored, right?
Right, yeah, we're like right now kind of re-engaging all of that and kind of getting it
Do you
back up to
actually
speed.
go to the units themselves or anything like that?
I don't know what staff has done in the past. I know Kevin's been working kind of like on what should this look like. I think, because it's monitoring is Luigi, Housing Trust Fund, conditional zonings that don't have any money in them. So sometimes we also have a number of projects that just made that promise. It's in their deed restriction, but they didn't get any money. So we're also, there's a lot of units.
Typically, if they've gotten a Luigi, they've also have that requirement of a CZ where they've made that commitment.
Correct.
Because any project with 50 or more has to go to city, 50 or more units, total units, not affordable units, but total units goes to city council. So the vast majority of like these large apartment complexes, if they've promised, then they have to be held to doing that.
So, but say I just have to hypothetically say this. If I have an apartment, I've got 78 units, and I say 50, it's going to be affordable. How do y'all know? And then like rent rolls, like I got a project I'm working on now. So I do rent rolls, right? I crafted on my Excel sheet, right? And I submit it to y'all and submit it to. But if there's no documentation that they have to submit, like a voucher, they get documentation from housing of the voucher that are y'all collecting documentation? How do you know like that it's affordable units and it's not something that's just being produced when we have such a crisis? You see what I'm saying? Like, I just be trying to figure out like what is that? Like, how do we really track it? What are they submitting outside of a rent roll that meets the criteria to ensure that they're actually doing what they committed to do?
Like the people that are living there, maybe their salaries or something, so you can
Like,
see that they're
'cause
below.
you submit, like, when I rented an apartment, I had to submit my paycheck stubs,
Right, okay.
you know what I'm saying? Like, I had to submit documentations, and it was one of those potentially affordable, like,
Right.
it wasn't specific, it was based on income. And so I submitted that stuff, and then every time I needed to renew my lease, I had to submit that stuff. And so they was able to track that, but how does it get back to the city to where they know for sure that's what's happening?
Do you want to speak to that, Kevin?
Sure. We're in the process of putting together a new compliance program for all of the programs that she's discussed, and we'll be, as the plan currently exists, we will be requesting leases, rent rolls,
That's what I was asking.
as well as a sampling of tenant files to look at income verification. We're also going to be, as a plan currently exists, we'll also be asking for how often are they communicating with the housing authority in terms of going to the annual meetings that the housing authority has to demonstrate how the voucher program works and could work, as well as we're going to be asking for a plan to ask for waiting lists for the affordable units, and we're also going to be asking for them to submit either invoices or proof that in their advertising for their apartment developments that they say we have such and such apartments available for people at a particular income level, and we do accept housing choice vouchers.
Thank you, that's exactly the answer. I was like, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, so I think I covered everything here. We do look at the subsidy per unit. We kind of say that 1.5 million divided by those number of units. What is that? It's just a measure. There's not a specific, 80,000 is the cap we've been using for Luigi. And then, after the period's over, what we will be getting back, likely to be more, I guess. So here's a summary of what's been approved so far. So approximately 157 apartments have been built. There are 78 under construction, and 100 have been approved but haven't been started, to my knowledge. Hopefully, I haven't updated this in a couple months, so hopefully this is all correct. And then we have another 76 in the pipeline. So that's where we are. So this part you may already know. So we don't, re-looking at this policy, I want to do it a little bit more thoroughly than we did housing trust fund policy.
I'm sorry, could you go back to that previous slide?
Sure.
So this summary says that in 12 years, there have only been 157 affordable units built?
Yeah, I think that's right. And from this program, because people weren't using it.
Well,
When
it's just specifically the WEED, just that you went through the WEED program.
Yes.
Yeah, so
This is not housing trust fund, this is not
Just specific.
bond, this is just land use
Well, in my
incentive
mind,
grant.
I was like, wow.
It was really when the points changed.
People started coming forward more.
When what I saw, like, I worked on a good many of those, and I think only two of them were before the point change. And I'd be curious to hear Paul's input on that, but I understood that it was when all of a sudden the policy allowed them to show something for more than 10 to 12 years, then it became something that was valuable as a developer at the bank. Before that, it was really just a little bit of pocket gravy for the developer because it didn't help them out with their financing structure.
Right, so I think like, I can't remember which one of those, you know, in that first row, one of those is like a 4-year agreement, for example. Like those are just, one
Skyline
might,
Exchange was very small. It
one
was
might be
maybe
7
5,
years,
4 or
so they're
5.
just much shorter payment terms.
Well, and there's more being, you know, approved here than we've done. So I think most of these are post 2018.
Yeah.
So to
Yes.
be fair, it's, you know, and you've got way more in the works than have been built. So I think.
The 78 units that units that are under construction, so those are ones that are happening right now, so those are our newer projects. Where it says 78 units, affordable units under construction.
Mm-hmm.
Those are our newer projects.
Not really. I mean, Radloff's was approved probably 6 years ago, or, you know, I mean, that's been in the works for a long time. Ashland Cox, yes, is newer. That was like late 2019, I think that went through the approval process. So, yeah, Radloff's and before, the older projects. Ashland Cox is now kind of in a standstill, but that's a newer project. And 66 Long Shoals, I think, was approved in early 21, maybe, or early 22.
So what about the 102 approved but not started? These are the new ones. I'm just trying to figure out like. which
So
ones-
Collier Apartments is actually an old one, hasn't been started at all. It's just, and that's the same developer as Ashland Cox. And, yeah, I think Reed Creek is getting ready to start. I'm not sure, you know, I don't know month by month what's starting and what's not, but
217 Hilliard's the micro.
yes.
So of the, like here, there's, because this says a lot, this chart, you know, and you're right, yeah, this is probably it's more like 2018, 2022.
Sure.
Two examples, like, so that Ashland Cox one, that's the parking garage that's stalled, right? Is
Well, the
park-
whole
is
project
Ashland-
is stalled.
Yeah, but I mean, that's one that's a parking garage now, and that's stalled and
Correct.
it's for sale, so like that is that example. So if that sells, which, you know, so it's for sale if it sells, the Luigi requirement will transfer
Yes.
in the deed, and what if they said, I don't want to do this, like, do they,
They'd
because
have
they
to come
haven't
back to
received any
council
funds.
because it's a conditional zoning.
What's that?
It's a conditional zoning, so they have to come back to council. So that's a
Okay.
part of their zoning as
Got it.
well.
Okay, so the Luigi is part of but the Luigi is not
The affordable
necessarily,
units are part of the
Con-
yeah,
Yes, the
Okay.
Luigi is not a part of conditional
Luigi
zoning.
is not
The
part of it.
affordability commitment is a part of it.
Yeah.
So it's like you're kind of double obligated.
yeah, got it,
And they approve that conditional zoning after they approve the Luigi.
got it,
So they kind of approved it with the understanding, you know, they kind of approved them together, so.
got it. So they're tied together, so it's not like, because what I was wondering is like, if it wasn't tied to a CZ, what teeth does
What's the
Luigi have in
mechanism?
if a project changes, or?
Well, since we don't have inclusionary zoning, we don't have, you know, we can't force it, really. If you had a zoning by right project, you just wouldn't get any money, right? You would not get any payments. And there is that deed restriction. I'm not sure of the exact consequence with that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like you'd have to come back and do something, I'm not sure.
I think these are great questions, and we've had them for a while, and I'm glad that there's gonna be some more presentations on both, you know, enforcement and, you know, how do we track this, because I think it's, you know, it's a concern of all of us, and I think it's a concern of the community, and what, you know, what ultimately would happen next, right, if we found out, you know, we get these new documents and we do a sampling and we find out there are actually not as many affordable units, that those are remaining vacant, what is the remedy? And as we talk about amending the policy, I think making that clearer, you know, certainly we don't want to discourage development, but we also do want to
Right.
make sure that this is, you know, when you get this resource that the city will not spend on other projects, but on yours,
Right.
that you follow through with it.
And we do have a kind of a piece, I didn't bring it with me, but about how do you remedy if you don't have all your units, or, you know what I mean? Like, maybe you have some, but you don't have all. We do have some language around that.
And I'm sorry, I misspoke a second ago about 50 units, because in the CBD, that's not, so all of these up here are CZs, except you've got like 3 that are level 2. So some of these level 2s that got enough, like 360 Hilliard, it got a Luigi, but if it, it doesn't have a deed restriction to do the affordable, but
It does, actually,
that one
because
does.
it was city-owned land. So we
Right.
actually had a deed
but some of
restriction
the
on
other
there.
ones that are level 2 downtown may only just not get their
Correct.
Luigi benefit if they don't provide.
But they will have a deed restriction on their property.
Okay,
That's a part of the Luigi,
nice.
for sure.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, thank you for, yeah, the CBD is a little different. So I think it's kind of like all on the table in a way for this policy. It can be a little painful to look at every single thing. It might be helpful to say, these things are working and we're not going to touch them. You know, what are the things we really want to concentrate on? HCD didn't happen in January, so we did not have a discussion with them about it. Barry's coming on February 8th to discuss your annual report with them, and I think it's also opportunity for Barry. We had a long conversation last month about this, about you all asking, like, what do you all, council, what do you want us to look on? In terms of Luigi, what do you want AHAC to look at? I also think it's an opportunity, though, for AHAC to give advice, right? That's your role. Here's what we think should be, changed. So it's a conversation that we'll keep making sure it gets communicated back and forth. Don't want to rush through this process, want to make sure kind of we're meeting with developers, community stakeholders, and internal city staff too, because we work with other departments on this. So I've kind of laid out a general timeline for this, and I think I put it into your calendar work plan. That's the next item. So there was a discussion at Finance Committee about it in January. I was not there. Nikki gave a presentation. These are some of the things they talked about that they were interested in hearing more about, sustainability. And that committee is the mayor, Councilwoman Maggie Ullman, and Councilwoman Kim Roney. Rental assistance, interest in voucher acceptance for 100% of housing units. Public reporting. So some of the same things we've discussed today. Cost-benefit analysis. And data. So let's see. So these are some of the questions we had outlined that we wanted to take to HCD. And they're kind of the same questions for you all too, I think. And that's kind of, my next slide is like, what would you, if you want to talk about it for now or not, if we want to move on, that's fine too. But if you have certain things, I think we've covered a few things, but that you want to kind of put on the list of policy questions and things we don't forget. And that's all I have.
And this is just how, because I was asked, this week you reached out to me to ask if I will go, if we can talk about this at HCD next meeting.
Right.
And
We're collapsing agendas, so we're not going to have
Yeah.
2 meetings in February. We're just doing one. So we're trying to collapse it a little bit and cover Luigi kind of in, like, with you all, yeah.
so I think what would be helpful is to, because you said you're not necessarily presenting on Luigi to
No.
HCD.
I'm not.
So it's more kind of in the line with where we've asked for getting guidance from HCD. So we're focusing on things we know they're supportive rather than focusing on things they're not supportive. So to get that, to get that direction, it would be helpful to know, like, what we as a committee, what are the questions that we want to know, and how would we gauge how do we ask the right questions to see what they want us to work, what their support on, so we're not working on things that they don't support on.
Well, shouldn't we all go, the whole committee go to HCD and be representative to be there?
Well, it's a virtual meeting, so it's not an in-person.
Oh, well, okay, so see how many of us can. Okay.
So, I mean, it also might be too early for HCD to give you direction, right? I mean, it might be specific direction, the way you frame
Yeah.
it. You know, it might be like, this is what AHAC's interested in. Does that sound, is
Sure.
that, you know, what is HCD interested in?
Yeah.
You know, I think it's gonna be an ongoing conversation.
Yeah. But that's where I think we have the opportunity, you know, where I think the opportunity exists is like basically it's kind of this early discussion, there's talk about policy changes. So there's definitely, what are the points we see about the weeds that should be brought into question or doesn't need to be brought into question? There's always been the audit policy about units, and it sounds like there really is, and there is an audit policy. I don't think we necessarily need, we don't need, we're being told there is, we know there is, so it's what are our questions that we would, how should this be, adjusted, or does it need to be adjusted? I mean,
Such as the micro units.
Yeah,
I mean, to me, that's a
Exactly.
really big issue that we need to talk about and address and adjust, that these people are getting the same amount of money for doing 200 square feet as people that are building 3 and 4 bedroom apartments. So, to me, that's not, should be looked at.
I like, that second question, what are particular areas of focus that it's a staff, but maybe the ACD, should be focusing on in respect to the Luigi policy? That's where we having most of that conversation. What do they see that our role is? And, you know what I mean, as we had that conversation, the things that they want us to be considering as we had that conversation, around the shift of policy. Because their vision, like they got them 3 questions are pretty head on, the optimal outcomes and vision that they feel that the Luigi policy is seeking to address, which will help guide our conversation as we talk about redrafting this. So it's kind of like shifting it to focus on what they see for us and what they're considering we should be looking at and considering. I like the micro housing though, that's crazy. But yeah, and I think like we've been asking questions as she's been going through it, so some of those things might be noted as ways to readdress that to ACD and what they would perceive.
so things that the conversations I know that we've had over the past that I would think that we would bring up if we want to, is definitely this unit, the unit size. Like that's definitely something that's come up time and time again. And it might be, I don't know if there is, and to know, like in the audit process or in the reports, like we saw those unit numbers. How many of those, like, are they all studios and 1 bedrooms? Is there any of those units family units? That would be a helpful data point to know, so we also can measure the success of a natural policy to know where we might need to adjust it to create the need for more family units.
What about energy efficiency, since there was something that we talked about, like what is their perception of what are solar panels, energy, like if that's a focus area that played out into what's current, like what do they stand on it, what does that look like for them, you know what I mean? And how they see as that weighing in this process of points for.
Like the different weights, like how much is.
Yeah, like
Mhm.
how
Yeah.
much should that weigh, because I don't think it should be as weighted as highly as the affordable units.
Right.
And that's what it looked like when we was going through it.
And so I think the points matrix needs to be reevaluated, because I guess more points lead to more tax breaks
Correct.
and allows you to sort of decrease your focus on affordability towards some of the other factors and get the same amount, get not a depreciable decrease in your tax break over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say pretty much anything. I mean, I'd say the energy efficiency is probably more appropriate for for reuse of spaces. I mean, almost any building built now, the efficiency of it built to code is way beyond anything that was built 8 years ago. Like, so I mean, I would almost. It's a funny little I think in zoning there's a sustainability bonus in zoning that, to my understanding, has never been used. But I could be wrong. But
Sustainability development.
Yeah.
I think that's right, maybe once.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
0 or 1.
Yeah.
The other thing I think that comes into play here that we saw in 221 Long Shoals is the creation of separate units distinct from other rental units in the complex solely for the purpose of affordability. And that concerns me in terms of not only just size, but quality of construction, finishing. You know, you're just creating this two-tiered within a complex, which is not the goal of this sort of more integrated affordable housing into the fabric of the complex.
Right. And and those are the kind of things that I think are very,
Yeah.
maybe they're not, but in my mind, they're simple fixes. Like, we just have these requirements, and then like when we have a draft or we have a discussion with developers,
Yep.
like say, here's what we're thinking. And just check it out with them. I mean, I don't disagree with that at all, of course, but
Has that actually happened? I haven't
not to
seen
my
that
knowledge.
happen.
Not to my, I've talked to
Just to
developers about
clarify.
it and asked them, and they said, oh yeah, of course, everything's gonna be the same.
Yeah.
Well, when that project came to us, it actually was like that initially. That's why we was
Yeah.
having a conversation, like, why are they here and doing, and these are the units, and like, that was really a part of the one that you used as an example, because we had, that was the one we had the conversation on, and we pushed back on, so they made adjustments to spread it out, because one thing you don't want is discrimination in housing and the development. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
that's like segregation of units, that's
So the units were actually,
separate, like they,
Not in that one,
Not-
it might have been, maybe a different one.
it was specifically,
location-wise?
yeah, location.
Okay.
I think it was one specific, we just called it a class of units, like the
Okay.
only studio units that were presented were the affordable ones. And we said,
That's-
hey, we can't have, like, and there wasn't anything in the policy, but we said, hey, you really shouldn't have one single class of units that you're calling
Right.
affordable.
I got
So they should be the same. I don't know if the location was different. I think it was more like, don't just do the studio units affordable if you're
Yeah.
doing other one
And
bedrooms.
this is really where we don't have the data, updated data, right, around the demand for one bedrooms, because one bedrooms still are the most demanded units. Right? It's, you know, it hasn't gone away. It's
Yeah.
not that we don't need family units, we do. We need both. It's not a, you know, it's a both and kind of situation.
And can someone remind, is there a working definition of family units? Either size-wise or
I don't
bedrooms?
know. I mean, I would,
Said,
would
Is
two
there- is there a-
bedrooms be, yeah.
Is there a current working definition of a family unit?
I mean, at two bedrooms, you could have
Sure.
one or two people with a child, or maybe
Right.
even two children, potentially.
so when it comes to vouchers, you can't do that, because if you got a male child and a female child,
For
you
sure.
can't have them in the same room, so
Right.
it's like, it's a lot of plays on when you're talking about affordable, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Affordable and accepting vouchers. And
That's automatically a three-bedroom
Yeah,
apartment.
it's more
Okay.
about like the 3 bedrooms,
Right.
because generally most families do have that dynamic.
So part of the affordable housing plan that we want to do, I don't want to use the word update, we want a brand new plan, right? So part of that would be getting our housing needs assessment updated, so we could get better data on this, just for the city.
So,
Is that-
yeah, to that point, one thing I'd love to see for the existing units that have already been completed, what percentage of those units are actually have voucher holders in them? Because my concern is that landlords, while they might meet the general affordability metrics, they're gonna discriminate against voucher holders. And so you could have 78 completed units, and I'll bet my bottom dollar, there aren't more than 10 voucher holders in those 78 units. So I just don't, and that's where we just end up feathering a landlord's or a developer's project by giving them tax credits, but don't address the most important need we have in the community, which is housing for voucher holders.
So
Yeah.
when you change the language instead of saying it will accept, it has to be set aside.
Yes, set asides.
That would be an
Or
interesting-
preference for, like, you gotta prove that I couldn't find a voucher holder, and then I took someone else, versus let me go through 50 other people, and then if I can't find anybody, I'll take the voucher holder.
And right now in the policy, there's not a kind of outreach, the inclusionary outreach is not mandated, it's preferred. And I did talk to Paul D'Angelo probably like 4 months ago about some of these things, like what are the things you wanted, you know, and he told me that was one of the things he didn't get to, you know, he wanted to, that was under consideration. Maybe he heard comments from council members, I'm not sure, but that making mandating like kind of that inclusionary outreach. And then the other thing he wanted to include was how do you calculate somebody's credit worthiness? He saw some issues with that. So for how you you're screening applicants and what's considered, that's very detailed and very technical, but
No, but it's
it
important
could make,
stuff
it
because.
could make a real
Yeah,
difference.
because people are gonna look at criminal records and credit scores, and they're gonna disavow 80% of our voucher holders.
Well, yeah, because what MHO does is credit is not considered when you have a voucher.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I mean, so therefore, I think it's again, I'll bet of the 78 units, there aren't more than 10 voucher holders. So and this is a valuable policy, I just think we just need to make sure that there's a preference. And just having them do outreach, I don't think is the issue, because they're inundated with people who have vouchers who come in looking for things. And it just creates they're just easy, it's easy for them just to collect the $50 application fee from these people and then never rent to them.
I think that the data from that data would be really important, because I hear what you're saying, Brian, but actually for a one bedroom, a voucher will pay the landlord more rent than renting it at an 80%, what maximum rent can be at 80% for a one bedroom. I think the voucher payment's higher. So I would there's benefit for accepting a voucher for a one bedroom or studio over charging maximum rent. I'm pretty sure that is.
But we also gotta consider the stigmatization of vouchers.
Yep.
And who holds vouchers. You know what I mean? Like, that's a real thing. And a lot of the vouchers are families, not a one bedroom. You know, a lot of them, way more are families, not one bedroom. And so it's like, but then it's this notion that, oh, they're from this community, they're bad. Like, it's a real thing that happens, like, it's a real stigma around vouchers.
Do you
And
think
so we
Kate
gotta
Pett
consider that.
would have any information on that, any data? Okay.
The Housing Authority has it, and they've got several people, and I've spoken with a woman who actually crunches the data every month, and she's watching them, and they, they're very cognizant of when they release vouchers and, all these different things that are going into the system. Because we get these monthly reports from HACA, and I realized that I was interpreting a number, like, oh, the number of people looking for vouchers is going down. And I was interpreting that as like, oh, Thrive is being successful, or Homeward Bound's being successful, and that's not what that's about. That's the number of people actively looking, but they also are very careful about how many they release at a time. So there's still people waiting for a voucher that aren't looking for a voucher. So the waiting lists are another thing. There's a lot there, and that's why I was thinking that maybe somebody from the Housing Authority could come, and maybe Kate is here as well. Maybe there's somebody from Homeward Bound who also is trying to connect people with vouchers. In landlords too, they do that as well. So.
The other thing, I'm just thinking of the things that over Luigi's conversations that have come up, just as we have our chance to see what the interest is for us to focus on, is like these are all larger projects. The current Luigi is available for as small as 2 units. Does that 2 unit mean it has to be 2 minimum affordable, or if someone literally had a duplex and they were going to do 1 unit affordable, 1 unit not? Is that eligible because 50% of the units are, or does it have to be two units that are affordable?
I figured this out once, but
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Okay.
It seems like we can look at that.
Yeah,
But it doesn't feel like we've had any small projects.
No.
Everything that's up there has been
The-
at least.
Yes.
The
But-
policy says that the proposed development must consist of 2 or more dwelling units for rent.
So it'd be 50% affordable with 1 unit.
Yeah, okay. So the one, so I think one of the questions that I think has been brought up here, and I think we've even said to encourage like different, how do I put it, like, right now Luigi is, if you say you're doing it for 20 years, you're committing it to deed restriction for 20 years. Smaller projects, smaller developers are more likely to try it if they say, hey, if it's like, okay, I need to see if this works first. So if I own a duplex and I'm willing to say, I'm gonna rent 1 unit out affordable and 1 not, and then get to Luigi just for the years you keep in the program, so almost like smaller commitments so people can try it to see if it works. I don't know because currently if you accept any Luigi, then there's a permanent deed restriction placed in.
until it's satisfied, or?
And that's been, I know that's been, that's been something that I've discussed with Kate, with Thrive about, that it discourages smaller landlords from it, because it's hard enough to convince smaller landlords to try this out. And if we had more flexibility in the program that said, okay, well, for the years you're doing this, you can get the rebate. For the, if this doesn't work and you opt out, then you just don't get that. You don't get the rebate, but we don't have our teeth in the deed restriction. And that's been something, that deed restriction is definitely what has discouraged smaller developers, and or feels like it has. And that might be a good way to study, look at, these are all larger projects. There haven't been any smaller projects. And then to talk with some of the smaller project ones to whether they just didn't think about it, or whether they realized, yeah, I'm just not willing to put a deed restriction on for that benefit.
And just to clarify, so in essence, right now, it's an all or nothing 20-year, and I think the question that's come up is, hey, could you look at a tiered 5, 10, 15-year?
I think it's the same
For
with the
small
amount of taxes you get granted back too. We could also, like for micro units, maybe it's you get 50% of your taxes back.
Yeah.
I mean, because I think it's the same, because we also have to be super careful about how much of our tax base we're
Yeah.
not gonna have.
Yeah.
And there's gonna be a real limit on that. And that's where finance comes in and says, okay, this is the number per year we can handle.
Yeah.
And above that's too much. Like, it puts us, for all the other services that people depend on, it puts us in a hard position, so.
That's
It
what I think
requires
we-
some analysis, I guess, is what I'm saying.
And I think that's what we've asked in the past, like, because we've said, do we need to have lesser length restrictions? Or literally, what is the penalty? What does this really look like? If I'm building a fourplex and I'm gonna rent 2 out affordable and 2 not, and after 2 years, I decide I don't wanna do this, what teeth, what's really left on it? Like, and I say, I don't want I don't need the tax credit, I don't want the tax rebated. This just didn't work out. What is the audit process or accountability back to the developer, back to the property owner? That's when I think of the things that there've been recurring conversations in committee about Louise. We've been definitely this unit, the unit size, the amount of bedrooms, the length of it, that it discourages smaller developers from stepping into the arena. And then, yeah, that points matrix, that it's, there's some things that are just, everybody's gonna check that, everybody, because getting energy, it's like, you literally get paid to do an energy. As a builder, you get paid for doing Energy Star, so there's no reason to not do it. There's no reason to not do it.
We're running out of time.
Okay.
Just one quick question. So do we have the opportunity to give you more specific feedback on that, the bullet point scorecard?
Sure, feel free to email me if you have ideas, and I'll just collect it. I'll just start a document with all of your different questions and try to maybe categorize them. And this is gonna take a little while. This is not like,
Yeah.
there's a lot going on.
Okay.
All right. All right. So next up, I think what we talked about is taking the scope of the work plan, layering it back to, in the past, we had kind of like a calendar framework. Is that in, looked at the document?
So I haven't put it in your drive. I did do this. It's very recent. And so I think probably don't have a ton of time to talk about this right now, but these were the 4 goals that were on your annual report. And can't rush it. So basically, I tried, this is very draft, well-made draft. I took some of the language that Indy drafted, that you all saw last month. I changed some things a little bit to kind of make it what you all are doing. So the number one, and the one I guess I want to talk a little bit about, is updating the housing plan. Again, I want to take that word update out, but developing a new housing plan. We have some money set aside for it. We're looking for we're applying for some grant money to supplement that. The way I've kind of been, this is my pitch speech here, so The housing plan would be kind of 3 or 4 parts. The first part is updating the housing needs assessment, which we haven't done for 3 years. The second part is evaluating the tools we have. And so there is a question in my mind, you know, the Luigi, there's a lot of work going on in the community, and some of that's all going to feed into the plan. You know, any work we do on Luigi here, Thrive has got a grant, they're looking at equitable outcomes, that would feed into it. Reparations Commission could feed into this plan. So how are our city tools working? What do we need to fix? How do we need to optimize them, tweak them? And then the third part is like, what are we missing? What's not here, right? Do we need to have a fund for preserving existing affordable housing? For buying, you know, like when those apartment complexes come up for sale and you're like, oh, the city should buy that or somebody should buy it. Should there be a fund? That's something that other communities have started. Chapel Hill's looking at it too. You know, so there's some tools that I think we don't have in our toolbox. And then the fourth part is, what's the plan? What's our 5 to 10 year plan? And if there was another bond, how would we use that money? I feel like it's our opportunity to kind of lay a roadmap for that and include the community in that, include all the stakeholders in that plan. And that would be that'd probably be a year-long process. So since we do have some money set aside, I want to start drafting an RFQ in the next month. I've talked to you all about maybe having a few members of this committee be kind of engaged in that piece. So here I wrote, you know, assist in developing the RFP, participate in the selection of the consultant, helping with community engagement. I didn't put like, oh, there'll be a steering committee. I don't know that for sure. There may be. If there was, obviously AHAC needs to be involved in that. Giving feedback on the plan at different stages. So I did this with the downtown plan back in 2008. I'd come to the downtown commission every month and say, here's where we're at, you know, and they would give feedback when it was appropriate. And then when we get there, you know, recommending hopefully plan adoption to HCD and council. The Luigi one we've kind of discussed. It seems like, you know, there's a lot of data and engagement to do. Trust fund, I've kind of pushed into summer. I mean, there's a lot going on, like I said. And then I didn't put anything for participating in the missing middle study. Vidil is here to give you all an update during our updates. So that's to be filled in. And there may be some other things that they may be engaged, you all may be engaged in, but I didn't want to presume anything, so. And Vidila hasn't had a chance to look at this, so. So that's where I got to. And then last thing, calendaring items. I was thinking, you know, if you all want to, you know, sometimes on commissions we said, oh, here's like a list of agencies or people we want to come talk to us. And we just kind of schedule those throughout the year, so. Or other events. So that's where I'm at. I don't know if we want to spend more time on this next month. If you all want to email me comments, do you want to talk about it for just like 5 minutes?
My thought just with time is this would be good, because I think we've actually had really good success working in our task force. Like, I think this would be a good one, like, to pull off, like, now this is the framework we used to use before COVID. Like, we used to have more guidelines like this and broken down by the month. We can move things, and this kind of helped keep us on task and focus. And this might, you know, just because this conversation, it's a hard, we're in kind of a transition time for our leadership, but I think this might be a good one to break up into the task forces and then have a better discussion on for next meeting. Does anyone have thoughts on that?
I do have a question. If we are looking at having that development forum with developers, the developers forum, like, well, that would be a number 5 on this calendar, just to, like, as we start thinking about it, and which group would be discussing that. And so I think I'm gonna connect. So how would which group would be discussing?
I'm missing like half of what you're saying, I think.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Okay, let me speak louder. Sorry. The development forum that was mentioned earlier, I think is going to be important as we start reevaluating all of this stuff and talking about all
for
of
sure.
these things. And so would that be in number 5? Will we put that in number 5 and then I guess, come back to the group and then we all just figure out which task force, I guess that's how we're looking at it, would be tackling that?
Yeah.
Well, I think it also fits into like, would we want to do a developers forum and that fits in with the Luigi policy? Like, we'd want it to fit into all these other things, right? So that we're kind of hitting multiple things at once. Or asking, maybe it's just all how it's, maybe the information we pull out of that could be used for Luigi and Housing Trust Fund and the plan. You know what I mean? Like, we're always cognizant of engagement fatigue and asking people the same questions over and over. So we just want to be super strategic about how we use people's time and when we would time that forum.
When you're planning something like that, they have to have lots of lead time to be able to make sure, because a lot of them are going to be from out of town, that they're here, they can come, you know, that kind of thing. So you're probably looking at several months of lead time for that.
And maybe it's a part of the, I don't want to speculate.
No, I get that it'd have to be in line with the time frame. I was just saying, like, that's what we would put it as a number 5. So like, say we say second quarter, you know what I mean, or third quarter, then we could. So I'm just trying to make sure I understand the process as we go away with this and we work in our groups of how we.
Yeah, I think in that case, like if we said, hey, we're thinking a developer forum would be good, feasibility, that's probably something that would be more likely fall by the time everything goes into it. So we would put it in third quarter and we would then have tasks, you know, like maybe for 3 months before that, there'd be things that say, we talk about it, the different committees are doing their part, like, you know, maybe the list of questions is coming from Connect, Build is maybe reaching out to the developers we know to do the invites, and then it kind of comes together in the meeting. That's how I would think something like that could work.
Yeah, I think so engaging, you know, getting developer input around Luigi is the third point under that, you know, number 2 goal. That has that's time blocked for, you know, April, May, early June. So if we're thinking, you know, like we just need to sync all these different activities up. So if we want to have folks, you know, if we want to gather developer input via the developer forum, and we wanted to hit this time block in order to keep this project on track, then that's when we schedule the developer forum. I mean, that's the advantage of having everything blocked out around what we want to accomplish, is that we can figure out, you know, what activities we need to do in order to hit those times.
And there may be different purposes, right? Like there might be a 1-hour focus group virtual call about Luigi, and that's different than a 4-hour development forum. That's a much more in-person, engaging, bigger picture thing. They might be 2 different things.
When is the city development, because the city usually does a development forum update, when is that? Because that might be something to kind of tie in with it, because that's usually, because some of those people are coming into town for that. Like, when is that one slated for next?
I don't know if they're still being held regularly. They were quarterly, but it's been a while.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
I think this is really important work to figure out how we're going to do this. Thank you so much, Sasha. I think this is super helpful for us to visualize it. And I think, you know, trying to assign these to the committees we have and maybe looking at, does there need to be another committee? Does it not fit into one of those? Is something we should talk about. Given that we're behind, though, I do have one question. Is there anything we would need to do for this first task? I mean, that's in the first quarter. We won't meet again until March. Are you looking for a committee or 1 or 2 of us to review the RFP, RFQ, or what's the ask there?
Thank you. Good question. So I think, I don't know that I can promise to have you a full one for your next meeting, but yeah, if there were like 2 or 3 people who I could work on a draft and send it to those folks for a first look and get suggestions before. Would you all want to look at it as a whole committee?
You could get a draft and we could look at it in our subcommittees and be ready to, or our working groups, and be ready to, you know, discuss it and approve it next month.
I don't know. We'll see.
Okay, she says.
We'll see where
Or the
we are.
following month.
Yeah, February or March, yeah.
Maybe that whole
March.
thing, maybe that, with the position of that is deceiving us, maybe.
I mean,
we should just
maybe
slide
April,
that
maybe
over.
your April meeting, then your, maybe February, March, we're working on that draft, and then April meeting, since it's the very beginning of the month.
Because is this a funded, like, is this something that's already the RFP, and is this already a funded thing?
It's partially funded.
Okay.
We're asking for some additional funds.
Okay.
so. But it's really important, so I feel like we really want to do it.
Yeah.
And it should be able to be completed. I mean, RFPs don't, they don't have to take months and months and months to do. It should be able to be completed in about 6 weeks.
Oh, the RFP.
The RFP
Oh,
itself.
yeah, right.
So,
Yes.
Yeah, it should be pretty
Agreed.
quick.
Okay, so do we want to just, for sake of moving on, do
Yes.
we want to absorb this? I think this is a good guiding document. It's similar to what we've used in the past. And then we could get because I don't see the file in here.
I'll share it.
Okay,
I'll
you
share
share
it
the
with all
file,
of you.
that way we have file shareability for moving this around.
And you could add some detail if you want.
All right. Any other questions, comments on that? Okay. Move to updates and reports. Since Vidila's here, I'm going to move him to the top so he can share with us what's going on with the missing middle study. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Vidila Satvika with Planning and Urban Design. Before I kick off, I want to introduce my new colleague, Kendra Tashoma. She just was hired with us about a month ago, and she'll be working with me intimately on this project. So, Kendra, if you don't mind coming up and just saying a few words about who you are.
Thank you, Vidila. Good morning, everyone. As Vidila mentioned, my name is Kendra Tashoma, and I am here by way of the City of Savannah. I served as a senior planner with them for about 3 years. Prior to that, I worked in Statesboro as a city planner as well. And I'm originally from Washington, D.C., and I'm just really excited to be here, and I look forward to hearing more about the work you all are doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Kendra. So, update on the missing middle housing study. So we are in the middle of contract negotiation. Our highest candidate is Opticos. Their subconsultant is named Cascadia Partners. They're both firms from the West Coast. We are excited to say that Sasha's department has contributed some funds to allow us to expand our budget to include a displacement risk assessment, which we wouldn't have been able to fund without their resources. And that will allow us to have a more thorough investigation on the vulnerabilities, possible risks, and any downsides that could result in rolling out regulatory updates that liberalize housing, so that any parts of the community that may be negatively affected will better understand what those effects may be and to what extent we may want to make decisions based on that data. So thank you guys for doing that, and that really aligns with your work and other city work, so it's a perfect synergy. At this point, we will be going to the Planning and Economic Development Subcommittee of Council on February 20th. Then we plan to go to City Council on February 28th to have our contract approved. And then the project will likely kick off in March. It'll probably take 6 months to a year, probably closer to a year, so that we can have sort of a robust outreach and engagement process. And I guess that's the summary for now. A couple things I'll mention. That we plan to have a steering committee. So if you all want to talk about who in AHAC would be appropriate to be on that steering committee, that'd be great. We'll still likely come to AHAC for regular updates, even if you want them monthly, but the steering committee would be sort of the formal, more broad-based coalition of various members to sort of help arbitrate decisions and directions as they come up. So that would be helpful. Is that it? I think that's it, so.
I mean,
yeah.
you'll come back maybe, or either through me, or you'll come back and kind of, once they're on board, and you scope it out, we have timelines, we'll share that with AHAC, like, what's the timeline of the work and what's happening.
Yeah, we'll have a lot more details once the contract is approved, and we'll have a project website, so, you know, this will all be out in the open a lot more.
Could you say the name of the two companies? Did you say Opticos?
Yeah, Opticos Design Incorporated. They're the firm that really coined the missing middle housing term. They have a lot of experience in this, and they've done a lot of similar work with other cities. The sub is called Cascadia Partners. Cascadia with a C.
No, Opticos.
Opticos, C. Yeah.
Have they done a similar study on the East Coast? Or is their work mainly on?
Opticos, they've done a similar study for Greensboro,
Okay.
I think for Greenville, Knoxville, probably others on the East Coast too. Yeah.
How many people did you have actually reply to your RFP when you were looking for these people?
Do you remember how many? 6 or 7.
6 or 7?
That sounds right.
What was the second's name again? I'm sorry.
The sub-consultant, Cascadia Partners. They're from Portland. Opticos is in Berkeley, I think. Their home base.
The scope, so it would be in the contract, like the scope of what the committees of they're working on will be, would that be in the contract? That would be, like, just so it's clear, because I know we've had, like, when I just think about the Thrive one, because it was kind of a little fuzzy, like, what exactly they're working on from what the scope was, so it will be very, when will we know exactly what the clear scope of what this consultant's doing is?
Yeah, we're finalizing that now. That'll be made public, and I think the general scope, I think you all know, but basically they'll be investigating our current housing policies and trying to find more comprehensively what are the barriers, and to help us understand and prioritize the best things that we can do to focus on changes to those regulations to reduce the barriers, to allow for more missing middle housing, which is like duplex, triplex, cottage court, you know,
Zoning
small.
policies.
Primarily zoning policies. Some of the work will recommend, you know, longer term changes that may have to do with fire, building code, things that we don't have direct control over.
Cool.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. I'm hearing, you know, it's actually one thing I'll just share related to not, I'm getting reached out to, there's a lot more buzz now about the state, you know, about the state taking a role in actually creating some affordable housing rules that, based on like West Coast California changes. You know, I'm getting reached out to more and more about that. Like the past couple of weeks, I think they're in session about a state affordable housing bill, like similar to the one that was brought up before, but I'm hearing there's definitely buzz going around right now. So I'll be excited to see where that goes. All right, I guess we can roll back to David. You've got a report you're sharing.
Yeah, well, I'll just sit here and try to keep it brief since we're a little behind. Most of you are probably aware, last week the National Alliance to End Homelessness was in town to present their report. Dogwood Health Trust had sponsored it along with the city to do a comprehensive sort of study and make some recommendations on how to move forward to deal with the growing homeless population in Asheville and Western North Carolina. So last Wednesday, they presented to both city council members and commissioners, county commissioners, and made a list of recommendations that would decrease homelessness by 50% by 2025. And so it's a very ambitious, very detailed plan. They spent a lot of time talking to people throughout the community, I serve on the HIAC, which is the Homelessness Initiative Advisory Committee, and that's also, it's a city and county committee, but it's also the Continuum of Care, which is responsible for distributing HUD funding and applying for HUD funding. And so, Sasha asked me to kind of give you an update, and I think it's just important to remember that, and the last recommendation is, of course, to look at affordable housing. They're not always related, but we know in places where there's increased homelessness, it's directly related to the amount of affordable housing, right? Chicago has less homeless people as a percentage than Seattle, right? And it's not because of they have less substance abuse, mental illness, access to services. It's because of the price of housing. So I think it's important that we all remember that, we're talking about a lot of things about homelessness. That problem is part of what we're trying to address here. So I'll just go through quickly the recommendations they made. You may have read them, and they go into pretty specific detail. It's like 10 pages of this. So that'll be my 2023. I think Sasha linked those documents. The first one is to restructure the Continuum of Care Board and get the county to hire staff that's dedicated to this issue. The city has, Emily Ball now has staff, has 4 people helping her. So we're going to look at the bylaws, try to separate the Continuum of Care, the organization, and not have it completely controlled by the city and county, which I think could be helpful. And one of the main goals is to include new members that are more representative of our community, because right now everyone on the HIAC is just appointed 5 from the county and 5 from the city, or 6, I think it's 6 from each. The second goal is to develop a clear process of how to access services and integrate them. I think with my work at Pisgah Legal Services, I see that there's not always a good sharing of information among service providers. I'm on the diversion end, so am I really communicating with other nonprofits and always aware of what services are out there? So I think that's a key need for the community. We have a lot of nonprofits, we have a lot of people out there who are interested in this work, but are they sharing data? Are they communicating? So obviously increasing the system capacity, and that includes building shelters, having a coordinated entry plan so that when somebody is experiencing homelessness for the first time, there's automatic resources. There's a website, there's automatic information about where to go and what to do. Obviously, the sooner they get those services, the more affordable it is, and obviously the better it is for that family in preventing long-term homelessness. So we're also going to improve data quality. That's goal number 4. I think we have some good data, but a lot of it, we did a point-in-time count on Tuesday. A lot of our methods for collecting data are not the best, not the most accurate, not the most significant, and so we're going to work on that, and also part of the sharing of the data will, I think, help address that. And goal number 5 really is to increase the amount of affordable housing. These things that we're talking about are pretty far downstream, meeting people where they are, but ultimately to really deal with this issue, we're going to need to look at how affordable, how there really just isn't enough housing here. So.
When is the Shangri-La and the other Days Inn, when are those actually supposed to be completed, those shelters?
I can speak to that. Days Inn is set right now for June, which is delayed a bit. And the Ramada project potentially this summer, but if not, summer, fall. Summer's ambitious. But those 2 projects combined will be providing 200 units of permanent supportive housing. So those 2 projects alone will make a huge impact on our homeless population.
So the report that was in the file, there's a good summary on page 7 of that report that goes through the state of affordable housing in Asheville and Buncombe County. It's good. I think everyone should review that. It just gives a good recap of where we are as a community in the shortage of housing. One of the statistics that's in there is that the vacancy rate for tax-supported units is like 0.03, which means there's no vacancies in the tax shelter Luigi supported units as compared to like 2.8 for the rest of the community.
Yeah, there is a lot of good data in there. I mean, they had data 40% rent increases, and we've been talking about how we can confirm that, and so we have that report now to show that basically in the last year, that's what we're seeing in Buncombe County.
Sasha, when are we getting are we reaching back out to Patrick Bowen to do another needs assessment?
Well, that's what I was saying, it's a part of, I want to do it as a part of that plan.
That
like
plan,
one
okay.
package.
All right. Thanks, David. I saw you actually walking out. I saw you walking with a yellow vest on the streets, on the downtown streets with. I think I saw Councilwoman Roney, you.
Yeah, Deborah Campbell was in
Campbell was there.
Yeah, there was a big turnout. So but I guess we don't have the results.
Yeah, but thank you for doing that. So that was actually doing the count, right?
Yep.
Is that separate from the January, the like official January count?
So this is the point in time.
It is the
yeah,
same.
It was,
Got it, we're in,
It was January.
Yeah.
forgot one month here.
2 days ago, it was January.
Got it,
Now
okay.
it is not. But
Thank you for doing that. All right. Sasha.
Yeah, so I provided your annual report just as a file for as a resource for you all, so you could see the final version. Barry and Margie and Andy all looked at it. Just a real quick update on a few things, some of these things we just covered. About the report, point in time, we had over 80 folks come volunteer, it was awesome. And probably better than, every year it gets a little bit better. The home CDBG application deadline's this week, and housing trust fund deadline is next week. We've had a lot of interest. Sounds like a lot of folks are applying. Staffing updates, since y'all I want to make sure you're aware. So there have been 3 new hires in January that have come on board. Miranda Masters is a home ARP analyst in the Community Development Division, and that's a whole process, and I don't fully understand it. David probably knows it better than I do, but there's a specific funding stream. We have a funding allocation that's due like by March 1st. It's going very fast. So they did community input, and they're going to some committee reviews. The home consortium is meeting right now, and that's why Nikki's not here. The Homeless Strategy Division, Charles Young, who's doing all the data pieces, he started a few months ago, and Debbie Alford and Catherine Ellington both came on in January. So they're now fully staffed. So that's a great thing. So this is the positive slide. It's all positive. Our real estate coordinator is retiring this spring after many years of service, and Jonathan Jones has just taken a position with Buncombe County. So, yeah, it's a loss. So we're going to post these positions pretty quickly. We'd love your help in getting the word out to find folks to replace them. And so Nikki will be, sorry, let me just finish real quick. Nikki will be kind of stepping in for Jonathan and taking on some duties. So what that means, it does affect everything. And that's why I was like, I did those bar charts, and I was like, I don't know, like the Luigi, it may affect my work as well, because it just is less resources. And, yeah.
That was my question, was you asked me, is everything on my own? Like, just 'cause
On an interim basis. I mean, there's discussions about, do we need, we're having discussions of like, do we need somebody who can just come in to help us with this piece or that piece, like on a very interim basis while we're listing this job. So I think we're looking at all the ways to make things go as smoothly as possible. So planning, Kendra left, but yes, so Kendra joined. Ben Woody's interim director. Planning's had a bunch of new hires, which is exciting. Jamie Allen, who's a native of Asheville, is business services administrator. Clay Mitchell is urban planner too in current planning. And Kendra Tashoma took my old job, actually, and so you got to meet her, and she is awesome. She's super sharp on the date. She's like getting a chance to do the things I always wanted to do, so I'm a little jealous. But she's on the data, she's really interested in displacement, and so we're having conversations about that and how are we measuring that and keeping up with that. Ellie Gross, who came from Utah, I believe, Urban Planner 1, so. And she's got some great skills in GIS and InDesign, so planning's doing pretty well.
So Ben Woody is serving as the interim planning and urban, he's also the assistant
Yeah.
city manager.
Yes, sorry, I thought you were gonna say, because he was interim DSD director,
Okay.
but he's not doing that anymore, so. Yeah, so he's got 2 roles right now.
Yeah, I think this is Todd. Todd is officially left, or
Yes.
Todd's left.
He's gone.
So Ben is acting as interim until they hire for that position. Development Services, Mark Matheny took over as interim.
No, he is the DSD director.
He was the appointed official?
Yes,
Okay.
he's permanent. Mhm.
Okay, so,
And
Ben
that
is
one,
also doing the city manager.
He is
job.
assistant city manager. Yeah, and this is kind of a trend where, it's nationwide. I read articles about governments, local governments having, it's a thing.
I did, when, did you get something on DSD or no?
I didn't.
Okay. So DSD, yes, the one thing that I was just going to share next to what we put as a recommendation, in our annual report is that the city looked to where we recommended and help push for, the affordable housing director role, which we now have, that there be like a paired role or designated person for that in development services, because there isn't right now. And there was, so that's something that, we pushed for out of, in our annual recommendations. And I did check in with Ben, because in the past, it was supposed to, it was never, because I asked him, was it funded? Because there was conversation back before COVID of them taking one of their staff members and making them the official affordable housing development services ombudsman or just lead person on that. And it was, someone was going to get appointed, and then they lost, then the trickle effect happened, they lost someone, and that never happened. So I asked him, was that funded? And he said it wasn't funded, but it was designated that they were going to have an affordable housing ombudsman. And so I just let him know that it's a conversation that we're going to be, bringing up again. That way there's, all of the things that come from the policy design, there's actually someone who helps carry them through on the development side, because there's a gap, there's definitely a gap in that, so.
Right. And then just lastly, HCD, as I said before, they didn't have a January meeting, so they're meeting next week. Annual report will be presented and 2 Luigi projects. And I think that's it.
Just so I'm prepared, because basically next, the HCD, we're discussing our annual report, and then we're asking some questions,
Yeah.
seeding about Luigi. How much time, because usually when we have agenda time and things like that, how much time should we anticipate that we as AHAC has?
Good question.
'Cause I know their agenda is very compacted.
It's compacted. I don't know. I'll talk to Rachel Wood about it.
Okay.
I would think you would have a certain number of time, like 5-10 minutes, and then there'll be some discussion time.
It just helps, that helps to know, because, whether our whole committee, because our whole committee comes through, whether we really line up, look, these are really the 3 things, because if we say 10 things, no, they're not gonna get across. It's really that's when you've got a compressed amount of time, we just need to be most succinct.
Right.
Okay. Thanks.
Sure.
I'd say on our Build and Connect, and we can sort of connect, and our biggest thing is when we helped, kind of get our, our committee's work, our task force work to get the annual report and the recommendations locked up, and I think it was a great effort by everybody, and I loved how it came together.
And that's the same with Connect. We mostly worked on our policy recommendations.
Sasha, is there any update on 319 time-wise, or?
Well, if Chris was here, he could tell you more. He's on the team. I think they're working towards a neighborhood meeting soon, and
But the
then
contract is complete and signed? Because last time it wasn't.
No, we're not there yet.
All right. Let's see what else. Going through updates. So monthly housing data. If y'all look through, one thing I noticed, I've noticed, and if you look through the sales closing reports, that the amount of, so I'm watching, the market is not, like, it was teetering for a minute, and right now the amount of new listings that comes on every day is less than the amount of things that go under contract every day again. So I'm anticipating a really brisk spring, and the amount of houses under 375 has declined again, where there was like a little bit of there was almost a time about 2 or 3 months ago that I thought I could bring the report down to the 275 level because there was some, and then so my filters were set up initially for that, so when I brought up the 275, I think there was 2. So I had to go back, so I brought it back to the 375 to bring it up to, I think it was 11. So while it looked like for a moment there was going to be a little bit of a market shift, I don't foresee it. I see the market, the spring market right now looks really brisk. And anything less than 400,000 is getting snapped up really, really, really fast. So that was my observations to share on that, because I was hoping for a while we were going to have a little bit of a slowdown or inventory was going to change, but I don't see that. I think there's very little coming on the market because no one wants to sell right now because of many reasons.
I did see where some of the, they closed at less than what the asking price was. There were a few of those which is good.
One trend that you can see, I don't know if it's on the map or if you kind of know some of these. I know the individual locations of pretty much all of those houses less than 375, and I just want to point out how location-specific things are. That if anything is, say close to, like up kind of Deaver View or up on kind of Stewart Street, coast to Pisgah View, if there's any new things or things for sale, that's where the prices are remaining low. So it's very, very location specific. Just a bit observing that, because you see the things that stay on the market are the things that are closer to HACA developments. So I think it's really interesting to note, like especially on that map that we've added on. So I just want to share that if you look at those. That's all I got on that. Any other comments on? I guess next the events news reminder. Yes, it is. I know the Board of Realty, the Land Sky is working on bringing up the Joe. I don't know if it's really interesting what they're doing. It's a group out of New York City. So I'd recommend looking into it.
And there is, after we posted this, they realized that the time is incorrect. It'll be at 10 a.m. and I'll send you all an email. And there is a registration link now on their website. They were going to do hors d'oeuvres, but now if it's in the morning, I'm not sure what they're providing. They'll probably have some food and coffee.
And then I know like they were here the Lost Star Affordable Housing Committee was here last time, and they're really looking for more ways to engage with us. And I kind of reminded them, and this is a good example of the makeup of our committee. We do have Babs is our real estate seat, and we're going to try to ask her to be more involved with that committee because they really want to stay involved, and they haven't had that. So they've asked for ways how they can stay connected. So they're working on mission. They are working on. Lost Star is working on creating that in an affordable housing. Oh, they're calling it. I know we hate the term, Andy, but they're creating. There's a workforce housing standard, and they're working on a continuing education class that would involve educating people about local affordable housing real estate. So I just applaud them for that effort and how we can support them and stay involved with what they're doing. I really this whole work that I've brought it up so many times this month of asking people what we should call it. And maybe it's offline, you and I need to have a beer and do this. Because it's like, I want to do something else, and I'm trying to figure out how we come up with another term, how to involve everybody in it, and almost like coin that.
But other counties do use that. I was in McDowell and Burke yesterday, and they both use workforce housing as a thing, so.
Well, I mean, you know, language is political, right? I mean, I have no trouble with workforce housing if we're talking about housing for all low-wage workers. If it includes the spectrum of, you know, folks, you know, below 30% of AMI and 80% of, if it's a blanket term for all of the people in our workforce, it's just when we start talking about, well, there's affordable housing and then there's workforce housing, like the people below 80% of AMI and below 30% of AMI aren't a part of our workforce. Like, it just perpetuates this stereotype that folks who need housing assistance to be able to afford a decent place to live are not contributing members to our community and workforce, right? So that's my, like, I don't, as a blanket term for everything, I don't mind it. But like, if we use that term to only refer to people of middle incomes, that's when I start having a problem with it. So I'm gonna talk about the term middle income housing. Housing affordable to middle income families. Like, that's what we're talking about. And housing affordable to low wage workers and people on fixed incomes, right? That's, those are where sorry.
No.
I thought I was going to get through this meeting without getting up on my soapbox once, but couldn't do it.
Yeah. No, I really appreciate you bringing this attention, keeping it, and I'm trying to help in everything, in the things that I do outside of here, help craft this term, and I think it's going to take all of us saying, okay, this is what it is, and everyone we talk to, this is what we're calling it, but I 100% agree with you, and I appreciate your passion behind it. So we'll count that as public comment.
Or affordable housing, because it's really, that means everyone as well.
Yes. All right, do we have any public comment? Nothing's been submitted? Nope.
No.
All
I
right.
have a question. I'll just ask Sasha, did the city staff or anybody that you ran into have any reaction to the newspaper article plastered on the front page and all the news that Asheville is the #1 worst place for renters in North Carolina and #5 in the entire country? Was there any reaction to
I haven't
that?
had any, yeah. I mean, I feel like we've been the most expensive market in the state for a long time, so I feel like we've been the most expensive market in the state for a long time.
In the
That's
state,
not news.
I was very shocked that we were 5th in the nation.
Yeah, I didn't
That
know.
was a
I didn't
little-
see that.
It was a little bit of a deceiving statistic because we're not 5 in the nation, we're 5 for our size. Like, it was actually really confusing because the newspaper, it reported it as like 5 in the top 5, and it's like, well, if you actually read through the top list, they broke them down by size of cities, and in our size class of city, we were #5, which is not, doesn't sound surprising at all, but it was a little, the way it was worded, it was a little, it wasn't like, it's not like New York City, San Francisco, Seattle, Asheville.
Oh, yeah.
But I also think it gives us something to think about, because I definitely see that, and I was like, oh, wow, it's not shocking, it's not coincidence. But as we start looking at our policies and what we're doing and addressing, it's like it's a real issue. And now it has the attention that it has, that it's hitting the papers and all of the things, it's something that we really need to take.
I wonder if Raleigh looked at it and said, oh my.
Yeah, and I mean, I agree that it's an important distinction,
Yeah.
but we don't have the economies of those places either. So the fact that Asheville is #5 among similarly situated cities makes things just as bleak for people here as it is there.
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's definitely, there's I think in the article, and there's definitely been discussion with like people like Nathan Ramsey that companies are not moving here now and concerned about expanding their companies because there's not housing for their employees, for employees to come here. Not even affordable. It's like affordable for any income level. I mean, it's literally, there's no housing almost here for any income level, any realistic income level, which is, that's a big problem. But,
Since I already broke my vow to not get on my soapbox, there were 2 things that I wanted to
It's public comment.
that I wanted to reference that have come up earlier in the meeting, and I thought we were going to get back to them, and since we didn't, I want to make this point. So around the idea of a developer forum, I have, I'm very supportive of getting input from developers. I also realize that, half of the members of this committee represent real estate development, housing development interests in some way or another. There's a lot more access to the development community represented in this committee. If we're going to put committee time and staff time around a forum, I think we need to give equal, if not greater, weight toward gathering community input from low-income stakeholders around affordable housing. So let's just keep that in our mind. We talk developer forum. We want to make sure that we're creating incentives that work for developers, but we want to make sure that we create programs that work for the folks who are ultimately most affected by the decisions that we make. So that's soapbox point number one. Soapbox point number two, maybe I missed it. Maybe that covered it. When we're having somebody talk to us, hopefully next month, around conflict of interest, I want to kind of reframe that, and maybe it's somebody from the city's CAPE team or somebody else who's related to. It's really more about the perception of credibility of the chair of this committee to the public, if they, as much as it is about actual conflict of interest. Can this committee chair, or does it have more credibility in the city, general public, if with a co-chair model where, it's not someone who, again, who takes funding from the city of Asheville to do development work? So if you're, when we're thinking about answering that question, it's not just,
Legal, not just legal.
I don't want,
I got it.
Janice Ashley to come in and say, this is what you would do in the case of an actual conflict of interest, because I feel like we all know what that is, but it's more the question of how do we enhance the credibility of this community, or this committee as a voice on affordable housing in how we select the leadership. No, sorry.
And I would say I have intentfully not applied for or taken any city funding, or I've purposely not applied so that there would never be any perception of that. So I can see how we've talked how there could be a conflict. Now that once I step off, that's going to change. But I purposely have not done that in any of my projects, so there would not be a perceived conflict of interest. So I do appreciate how important that is, because we talk about things that fund projects, and if the committee or leadership, if the leadership of the committee is one that's taking it, it's a little fuzzy. But
It's like a double-edged sword though, because I feel like y'all are working to address the issues that we discuss this committee every month, and so it's like how it limits y'all's ability to be, you know what I'm saying, like to be doing that work outside of this community that's helping the issue, and it restricts y'all from being able to get the much of the support and funding that helps support y'all addressing the issue, and then bringing y'all's knowledge and y'all's skills and expertise to this table and sharing it so that we can make it better. And it's kind of like, wow. That's not great. I'm sorry, that's just like, what? First of all, y'all are volunteering to give y'all skills and expertise and trainings to this committee, and then not being able to access the resources and services that y'all could be utilizing to continue helping to address the issues that we talk about. That's crazy. Like, wow. A lot of respect, because that's interesting. And you are the chair position and been doing this work for so long. Yeah. Thank you for the sacrifice, but that's wow. I just hate that you had to make that sacrifice. I guess that's why I'm like.
all right.
Do you all want to stay for lunch? You want to hang out?
All right.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you.
Are you gonna order
Sorry.
Oh, I thought they were
Conflict of interest.